Think about when your year begins. Not the school year, not the tax year, the real one. The one the whole planet counts down to at midnight with fireworks and resolutions and a brand new number. It begins in January. And January is the dead of winter. Sit with how strange that is. The fields are frozen. Nothing is growing. Nothing is being born. The world outside is at its darkest and its coldest, the very bottom of the year. And that somehow is the moment we have all agreed to call the beginning. Now look at spring. The snow melts. Seeds crack open. Lambs are born, rivers run again, the whole earth visibly starts over. If you were inventing a calendar from scratch with no instructions, you would start it there. Every farmer who ever lived would start it there. Beginnings belong to spring. So why don't we? Why does the most important reset on your calendar fall in the one season where nature has shut the lights off? Somebody moved it. And if you go looking for who and why, you find a fingerprint hiding in plain sight, in the names of the months you say every year and never question. This is the story of how the new year ended up in the wrong season. Here's the clue everyone walks past. Look at the last 4 months of your year. September, October, November, December. Say them slowly and listen to the Latin buried inside. Septem is the Latin word for 7. Octo is 8, it's hiding in octopus with its 8 arms. Novum is 9. Decem is 10, it's sitting inside decade and decimal. So September literally means the 7th month, October the 8th, November the 9th, December the 10th. But that's not where they sit. On your calendar, September is the 9th month, October is the 10th, November the 11th, December the 12th. Every one of them is off by exactly 2. The names and the numbers don't match, and they haven't matched for thousands of years. That is not a mistake. That is a fossil, a word that kept its old meaning long after the thing it described had moved. And a fossil like this only forms one way. The months didn't shift. The starting line did. If December was once the 10th month, then count backwards. The first month wasn't January at all. So when did the year really begin and who reached in and changed it? For that, we go to Rome. In the oldest Roman calendar, the year did not start in winter. It started in spring, in March. And once you know that, the fossil snaps into place. Count from March. March is 1, April 2, May 3, June 4. Keep going and September lands exactly where its name says, the 7th month, October the 8th, November the 9th, December the 10th. The names were never wrong. We just moved the start and left the labels behind. So why March? Because to the Romans, March was when the world woke up, and just as importantly, when the fighting could start again. The month is named for Mars, the god of war. Spring was campaign season. The roads dried, the armies marched, the new consuls took up command. A year that began in March was a year built around planting and war. And here is the detail that sounds almost made up but isn't. The earliest Roman calendar had only 10 months. Winter, that dark, dead, useless stretch after December, wasn't counted at all. It was just an unnamed gap. Roughly 60 days of cold that nobody bothered to put on the calendar. So the year didn't start in winter because, at first, winter barely existed. Which raises the obvious question, who finally filled in that gap? And what did they name the doorway they built at the front of the year? The answer is a god with 2 faces. To close that dead winter gap, the early Romans are said to have added 2 new months at the end of the count, and one of them was January. It takes its name from Janus, and Janus is unlike any god you know. He is the god of doorways, of gates, of thresholds, of beginnings and endings. And he has 2 faces, pointing in opposite directions, one looking back at the year that has passed, one forward at the year to come. He is, quite literally, the god of the turning point, the face you would invent for the very idea of before and after. Think about how perfect that is. The Romans needed a guardian for the seam in the calendar, where one year ends and the next begins. And they had exactly the right god waiting, the one who stands in the doorway and sees both ways at once. His temple in Rome had doors thrown open in time of war and shut in time of peace, and they stood open almost always. Every doorway you walk through, every January still carries his name. The word janitor, the keeper of the door, is his too. So now there was a month called January, the doorway month. But naming a doorway is not the same as walking through it first. January existed, and the year still began in March. Something had to move the start line onto the threshold. That something was politics. The year did not move for the seasons. It moved for power. In the Roman Republic, the calendar was wrapped around the consuls, the two men elected to run the state for 1 year. The consular year was the unit that mattered when they took office. The clock of government started. And at one point, that day was pulled back to the 1st of January. The reason was state business. A military emergency in Spain, the story goes, meant the new consuls needed to be in command earlier, before the spring campaign. So the official start of the year was moved out of Mars and his war season, and onto the doorstep of Janus, the 1st of January. Notice what just happened. The beginning of the year stopped being an astronomical fact or a farming fact and became an administrative one. It marked when officials took power. The year now began on a bureaucrat's schedule. Then came Julius Caesar. In 46 BC, he tore up the messy old Roman calendar, which priests had been manipulating for advantage, and built a new one on the solar year, the Julian calendar, with January as the first month, locked in. For Rome, the matter was settled. The year began in January. But Rome fell, and when an empire dies, its calendar does not simply roll on untouched. The new year was about to come loose all over again. Here is what almost no one is taught. For most of the last 2,000 years, when the year begins was not a settled fact. It was a local choice. When Rome's grip faded and Christianity reshaped Europe, January 1 fell under suspicion. It was a pagan festival, the feast of a two-faced idol. So across medieval Europe, the start of the year drifted, and it drifted onto the Christian story. Many places began the year at Christmas, December 25, the birth of Christ. Others began it on March 25, called Lady Day, the feast of the Annunciation, when the angel tells Mary she will bear a son. That date sat right at the spring equinox, the old instinct that the year belongs to spring, now dressed in sacred robes. So picture this. You could cross a river in medieval Europe, and the year number on the far bank might differ from the one behind you. A letter written in one city and read in another might carry two different years at the top. The new year had come completely unglued, scattered across Christmas, the equinox and Lady Day, depending on where you stood and who ruled you. And it stayed that messy for centuries, until a pope, and then a string of reluctant governments, dragged the whole thing back to the 1st of January, which is where the calendar you live in was actually born. By the 1500s, the calendar had another problem, a mathematical one. The Julian year was slightly too long, by about 11 minutes. Tiny, but over centuries those minutes piled up, and the calendar had slipped 10 full days out of step with the sun. Easter was drifting away from spring. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII issued the fix we still use, the Gregorian calendar. It deleted 10 days to realign the seasons, fixed the leap year rule, and set January 1 as the start of the year. But here is the part that surprises people. Much of Europe did not simply obey. The reform came from the Pope, and Protestant nations were not about to take their calendar from Rome. So for nearly 200 years, Europe ran on split time, Catholic countries on the new calendar, Protestant ones clinging to the old. Britain and its American colonies held out until 1752. Until then, the official English year had begun on March 25, Lady Day, that old equinox start. So Britain formally moved New Year's Day to the 1st of January and snipped 11 days out of September to catch up. People went asleep on the 2nd and woke on the 14th. That is how recent this is. The English-speaking world has only agreed the year starts in January for a few centuries. The thing you treat as eternal was argued over and signed into law by people who had names. So what, in the end, is New Year's actually made of? Now stand back and look at what you found. The moment you count down to every December, the fireworks, the resolutions, the fresh start, it has nothing to do with the sky. The sun does not turn over on January 1. No orbit completes. No season changes. The actual astronomical turning point, the winter solstice, is more than a week earlier, and the rebirth of nature is months away in spring. January 1 marks none of those things. What it marks is a chain of human decisions, a Roman doorway god, a military emergency that pulled the consul's year backward, Julius Caesar locking it into law, a church that buried the pagan date, then a pope who resurrected it, governments that argued for 2 centuries, and a British parliament that finally moved its own new year by statute in 1752. That is the turn. New Year's Day is not a natural event you are observing. It is a political and religious decision you inherited, so old and so total that it stopped looking like a decision at all. It just looks like reality. And the proof was hiding in your own calendar the whole time. September, October, November, December. 4 months still wearing the numbers 7, 8, 9, and 10. The last witnesses to a year that began in spring, before anyone moved it. So here's where it leaves you. This New Year's Eve, when the clock crosses midnight and the whole world cheers at once, understand what you are actually celebrating. Not the turning of the earth, not the return of the light or the first green of spring. You are celebrating a Roman bureaucratic deadline, guarded by a god of doorways, and confirmed much later by a pope and a parliament. The dead of winter never made sense as a beginning. It still doesn't. You feel it every January, in the cold and the dark and the gap between the resolution and the reality. You are starting your year in the one season that argues against starting anything at all. And you do it because, thousands of years ago, it was convenient for someone else. None of them knew you. None of them asked. And still, they decided when your year turns over, when you are allowed to feel new again. The proof is right there in the names. 7, 8, 9, 10, walking out of step, every single year, waiting for someone to notice. Which makes you wonder what else in your ordinary, obvious, everyday life is really somebody's ancient decision that you never agreed to. That's what this channel is for. I'm glad you're here, and I'll see you next time.